Greetings and welcome, I'm Ash, and this is my review of Sorcery, a faithful adaptation of Steve Jackson's fighting fantasy gamebooks of the same name, and much like them, it features an astoundingly well-realized world filled with plenty of choices to make, monsters to bedazzle, werewolves to duel, and mysteries to solve. The first two parts of the Sorcery quadrilogy will be arriving on Steam today, with a third part following shortly and part 4 set for later this year. But for now, let's focus on the first half and see how well it stands up to scrutiny on its own. In Sorcery, your story starts like any other. A brave young hero for a tiny village in the middle of nowhere sets off on a grand mystical quest to retrieve a magical doodad and stop a tyrannical ruler from conquering the world. And while the premise might be as generic as it gets, the location you will explore and the people you will meet are anything but. The size of the world you get to explore is on first glance rather unimpressive, but it is actually so chock full of locations you can potentially visit that there is absolutely no chance you'll be able to see all of them even after a couple of playthroughs. There is just so many of them. And the world map itself is styled as an actual physical map your character might be carrying around with him, which is a rather nice feature. If you've grown up like me alongside Tolkien or other such writers that use those beautiful hand-drawn maps filled with tiny little details everywhere, then you know exactly what kind of a map Sorcery uses. Best thing about it though is that you move your character from location to location by dragging him as if he was a D&D miniature. It's such a small thing, but it made the whole experience much more immersive, as it felt like I was playing a particularly well-crafted D&D session with a dungeon master who thought about everything. And when I say everything, I really do mean everything. The choices you get to make in Sorcery are quite diverse and allow you to play as a benevolent hero, a merciless thug, or anything in between, with the game changing itself in realistic ways to accommodate your style of play. In a stark contrast to many games out there where NPCs can't wait to backstab you, the people you meet in Sorcery will usually respond to you in kind. If you accidentally run into a group of guards gambling, you can simply apologize for the interruption, have a laugh about it, and then either leave or potentially even sit down with them. On the other hand, if you enter the same dialogue with a condescending tone or act like a douchebag, you bet they're gonna beat your ass up and throw you in a cell for the night. It just makes sense. The fact that so many people you meet are honest individuals trying to make their living in a harsh world makes the betrayals you experience all the more painful. Would you care if a random bandit you met alongside the road betrayed you? Probably not. On the other hand, what would you feel if a poor peasant you helped before sold you out for enough money to keep his family fed for an entire year? Not so easy this time, is it? Needless to say, the writing in Sorcery is simply superb. I don't know if it was lifted from the gamebooks or written by the developers themselves, but each character has a unique voice and tone, despite never speaking a single word, and the locations are so well described I couldn't help but get myself immersed in all of it. Besides simply talking your way through problems, you can always ignore them and walk away, or perhaps use your sword arm or even magic to solve them. The magic system in Sorcery is rather tricky, giving you access to 50 or so spells, each of which have their own specific uses and limitations. It is completely up to you when, how, and which spell you will use, as Sorcery doesn't hold your hand in this regard, not even a single bit. For example, the DUM spell will cause the targeted creature to become extremely clumsy, making them unable to run or wield weaponry, but if you use it against large beasts that rely on brute strength, you will accomplish almost nothing. The LAW spell will allow you to mentally control non-intelligent creatures, which requires you to know whether a werewolf, for example, is intelligent or not before you waste your time casting a spell and getting chomped on. Aside from the inherent risk of knowing whether your spell will have the desired effect or not, you will also spend your stamina points casting them. The ways you regenerate stamina are fairly obvious. Have a good night's sleep at an inn, eat some food to keep up your strength, and so on. The one problem with stamina management is that it's almost completely pointless if you're like me and roleplay the kind traveler, since you get access to a prayer that allows you to constantly top yourself off. Even though Sorcery makes a big deal out of carrying provisions so you don't ever end up cold and hungry under a tree at night with no stamina, I found food to be mostly useless in my playthrough, since a combination of sleep and prayer was enough for me to stay in tip-top shape. Somehow, I don't think your character being an ultra monk was an intended part of the game design, but it unfortunately ended up like that because food just doesn't give you enough stamina back for the gold cost involved. On the other hand, if your words fail you and your spells fizzle out, you're going to have to rely on good old-fashioned combat to save the day. As far as presentation goes, the combat in Sorcery is once again very reminiscent of an excellent D&D session with your DM, or in this case the game, giving you vivid and detailed descriptions of what's going on. While the combat narrative will have you at the edge of your seat, the actual combat mechanics are quite frankly lackluster at best and completely broken at worst. You have two moves available to you. You can defend, which reduces incoming damage to 1, or you can go on the offensive by selecting how much of your energy you're going to use upon an attack. If you use more energy than your opponent, you will overpower their blow, thus dealing massive damage while taking none yourself. Constantly using powerful attacks doesn't work since your energy pool regenerates only a certain amount per turn, so in theory you will need to wisely combine offensive and defensive play in order to trick and deceive your enemy. The problem here is that there is almost no way to know what your enemy will do without dying or losing a lot of health to them first. And once you know their exact pattern, which they repeat every single time, even battles with the most powerful of creatures become a joke. Instead of adapting your strategy to each and every enemy, I managed to beat the entire game with this rotation: medium attack, defend, powerful attack, medium attack, defend, and repeat. There were very few creatures in the game that seemingly had enough energy regeneration to keep up with my pace and overpower me, so in general the supposedly difficult and risky option of fighting your way through problems turned out to be a fairly easy and reliable one. Luckily, you can almost always avoid combat by either being charismatic, clever, or downright paranoid and avoiding areas that might look like a trap, which is a usually good idea. It is this sort of decision making that truly sets Sorcery apart from other such games. As a little experiment, I decided to try replaying part 1 and choosing all of the options I originally ignored. The results were quite shocking, as not only did the way I experienced each location change drastically, but my path across the map did so as well. I ended up going a completely different route than I did the first time, and it was just as well written and fleshed out as the original one. The only problem I have with the choices is that Sorcery is far too merciful to you by allowing you to turn back time any number of steps, so you can choose a different outcome if you dislike what's currently happening. Personally, I feel doing so cheapens the whole experience and ruins any sort of tension the story might have, so if you do end up playing, I'd fully recommend you ignore the feature and see how far you can get just on your own. Sorcery Parts 1 and 2 contain an incredibly well fleshed out world with realistic characters, interesting locations, and plenty of difficult choices to make which come with far-reaching consequences. The combat system might be lackluster, but the writing is absolutely top-notch and will have you immersed into the world in no time. As a big fan of RPGs, I found myself greatly enjoying Sorcery despite a couple of issues, so if you're a fan of narrative-based games or visual novels in general, I feel I can fully recommend Sorcery to you. Just keep in mind that this is the sort of game you're supposed to play through multiple times in order to fully experience the world and all of the elements of the story, since there are a lot of things you might miss in your first playthrough. Thank you guys for listening, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please let me know, and if you would like to see more, you can either subscribe here, or you can check out the website linked down below. That one tends to be updated more frequently. With all of that said, I hope you have a nice day, and I will see you really soon. See ya!